This interview is for information only and should not be considered as investment advice or a recommendation to buy shares in the company featured. Welcome to this Stock Box interview. Today is Darren Hazelwood, the CEO of Panther Metals, following some news from the company and their property, the Dotted Lake project, where they've got a new nickel target has been outlined. So hello, Darren. Thank you very much for joining us today. We're going to go through a few slides. But first of all, how are you doing?
I'm very well, thanks, Mark. Thanks for having me on.
No, it's good to be talking, Darren. I can see we've got some slides to talk about, which I'll ask you some questions on. But as I understand, what the work that's been done is you've actually digitized some historical geochemical soil survey results that's been based on work that was undertaken quite a long time ago, back in 1983. So you've actually taken these historical results and digitized them. And is that what we're seeing here on this first slide? It's a digital representation of soil sampling results or geochem results.
Yeah, I think this slide is just showing the areas, Mark, where Palladium One have been working and the success they've had. And I'll show you shortly how that's moved across towards Dotted Lake.
Okay.
And we've been watching Palladium One very closely over the last few years, and now that's got to a stage where we felt that it was fully warranted doing a review of the historic data at Dotted Lake. And you know what it's thrown up for us is very interesting, to say the least.
Okay.
We drilled a stratigraphic hole at Dotted Lake last year. We had some success with gold in that hole, but we were mainly looking at the rocks at that stage, and we'll come to that as well in a little while. But
so we're looking at here. Then we can see the Dotted Lake project there on the bottom left of the slide, and then is it Pickle? That's the Palladium One area, is it?
That's correct. So if we work from the left, from Lampsum is also on our Dotted Lake property, and we've included that because we've got extremely high anomalous copper in the Lake Sedza. It's actually sort of the third highest in the regional survey, and it's always been a location that's interested us due to that anomaly that's never really been followed up on. So you've got Lampsum and Dotted that incorporate the Dotted Lake property, which is a bigger land mass than you can see on this map. But as you move across to the right, you can see Pickle. Now, West, that's actually West Pickle Lake, and that was the announcement that Palladium One released on the 7th of September. And within that announcement, they actually said that they'd identified a new 20-kilometre nickel sulfide district scale opportunity. And as that has moved so close to Panther, we felt now was the time to do this review and just rummage through the historic data. And it's thrown up such interesting news that we've put it in a package and we've released it, and this is what I'm talking about. But you can see here you've got the West Pickle Lake, you've got the RJ, Tycho, Bulldozer and Smoke. Now those lines, we've put those in this. We've been doing some internal work on it, and they represent nothing other than they're there in this instance.
Mm-hmm.
And that is, you're seeing from West Pickle Lake to Smoke Lake, that's the 20-kilometre nickel sulfide district scale opportunity that Palladium One had talked about. Now, West Pickle Lake is actually a joint venture between Palladium One and First Class Metals, which are a reasonably newly listed UK company. And I know that they're extremely delighted with the results they've got.
Mm-hmm.
But what's the way that Palladium One have been tackling these zones, because this is new, and the Canadian Geological Society hasn't actually really mapped this area at all to any great extent. So it'd be interesting to see if they now get out here following these successes. But what they've been doing, they've been looking at the mag highs, and they've been then doing their metallurgical work on surface, and they're looking for anomalous grades of ore in soil. that combine with the mag highs. Now, what you can see on this map, and it is reasonably clear, if you look at dotted and then across to Lanson, you've actually got some very big mag high units on where dotted is and below Lanson, but particularly where dotted is, and particularly in the area of interest to us. And if I just move on one slide, Mark, if you're okay with that.
Okay, yeah, let's look at the next slide then.
So what this is showing the results of the metallurgical work that's been conducted. And these have largely driven Palladium-1 to drill. And on the left-hand column, you can see the copper numbers, and these are all in parts per million. So this is how many parts per million was in that soil sample of the particular ore that is tested positive for. So in Cu is copper. So in this case, it's copper. So you can see West Pickle Lake had 153 parts per million, and then that comes down. And Smoke Lake, all those stuff. And then you'll come down to the Dotted Lake area, which I'll show you these locations shortly. And you can see the type of numbers and the type of results that we've got there and why it's of such interest. We can move across to Ni, and that's nickel. Again, parts per million. And people can pause the video, and I just ask them to do their own review. Me listing off the numbers really isn't going to excite people. And then you move across finally CO, which is cobalt. And again, this is all in parts per million. But as you can see, this Dotted Lake area, and remember this area is untested. It really does stand up to scrutiny. Because of the work conducted by Palladium-1 and to a certain extent first-class metals, this is what's driven us to now review it at this point. And it certainly throws up some anomalies, the anomalous situation that really is interesting. There's further information that I'll allude to shortly as to why this is particularly exciting.
And these results that Panther that's highlighted here in the yellow, this is results that you've actually, studies that you've undertaken recently?
No, so these are all historic samples.
Historic samples, okay.
So this was done in the 80s, actually. And we've gone through the historic reports and looked at this as a direct result of the success that's being had in the area. Okay. And we're looking at it with slightly different eyes. See, originally we were looking at Dotted Lake purely from the gold aspect. We had a really nice gold showing, and that's the area that we drilled. So we wasn't looking at the potential for nickel sulfides in particular that now we're seeing.
Okay. Well, I mean, at first glance, it looks very promising. Just looking at the comparisons there between, of course, West Pickle Lake, which was announced by Palladium-1 and First Class Metals just last week, that got them all quite excited. I mean, obviously, these are results from a while ago. Let's not get too excited at the moment. Panther's obviously got to get on the ground and do their own modern exploration. But as an initial sort of study, it's looking quite interesting, would you say?
Oh, absolutely. As a starting point, this is absolutely it's a stunning development, and you'll understand a little bit more as to why as well in a moment.
Okay.
If I move on to the next slide here, Mark, and this is where it gets a little bit technical, but it's also very interesting. So what this is showing, this is showing the geology of the area, and particularly of Dotted Lake. That the black box effectively is Dotted Lake. It does continue further south, as you can see, and actually further to the west. But the area of interest to us is just to the right of where it says AU, which is gold, and that star shows where our drill hole was conducted in the autumn of 2021. So to the right of the AU, you're seeing this green rock around the top. Now that's granite. We know that's granite. And then now you want to come down from that. So this middle section that I'm running my cursor over, that's what they call gabbro. Now gabbro is a responsive rock, and it's also what we call an intrusive rock. And if we come just south of that to this, it looks like, if anybody remembers the sort of side profile of a frisbee, I guess you could say, you see this running on here. Now that rock there is listed as serpentinite, and that's also an intrusive rock. Now, interestingly, there's only one other area in the dotted lake, in the wider Hemlow area, that where you come across this rock, and that has got very high anomalous platinum, palladium, copper, nickel, and it's an intrusive rock. Now these two rocks, what they're doing, they're the ones that are providing the mag high, and this area where I'm running my cursor over now, hopefully people will be able to see that. That is the area we're talking about regarding the soil samples.
Okay.
And you'll see more information on that on the next slide. But the reason that this is so interesting is that you've got the contact zones between two separate intrusive rocks. Now, intrusive rocks are rocks that have during under great heat and pressure, they're finding weaknesses in the Earth's crust, effectively, and then the pressure behind is pushing those rocks up.
Yeah.
And they're very often, the point is the contact zones where intrusive rocks meet, that you can find ore deposits.
Yeah, it's where the ore can collect, isn't it? Yeah.
Correct. And that's exactly what's happened here. And because they're gabbro and serpentinite, that's why you're getting the high mag result that we saw in the first slides.
Mm-hmm.
But very interestingly, we've got a contact. We've got three different contacts, what they call contacts. We've got one where the gabbro meets the granite. We've got one where the gabbro meets the serpentinite. And then you've got one to the south under the lake that actually then comes up at surface again on the west or the east shore of Dotted Lake, depending on how up what side you're coming in from. But we've got conductors here as well, which are underlaying. Now they show up in the mag survey. And we've got a very strong conductor that runs approximately as I'm moving my mouse there, that is one very strong conductor. That conductor, it aligns with the correct rocks. It also aligns with the metallurgical results that we've received.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a second conductor just into the gabbro that runs something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Again, very strong feature. Now, what you're starting to do here is piece together you've got conductors, you've got the right rocks, you've got the right soil results. Suddenly, you're looking at a very interesting area. Combine that with the work we now know has been conducted in the area and the success that Palladium 1 have had, and it very much all comes into the mix.
It's sounding very similar to the Palladium 1 sort of deposit, and of course the first class metals as well involved there. It's all this kind of nearology. This deposit, if you like, or this geology covers a very large area, covering multiple companies, projects, and license areas. It's sounding very similar to me. Is this now going to be the focus of Panther's area of interest and going forward, do you think?
On Dotted Lake, it will be,
Mm-hmm.
But we've got many areas of interest. So you know, this isn't suddenly rushing to the top of our list. We'll be we're very much focused on Dotted Lake. Sorry, apologies. on a bonga
Mhm.
at this point.
Okay.
And a bonga really is our focus, and for very, very good reasons. But yeah, Dotted Lake now, there are very good reasons why this should not be forgotten. And we've had the trigger point, because the trigger really is the success that we're seeing. And as you mentioned, the neurology. If we go to just, if I take you just to the last map, Mark, if that's okay.
Sure.
Now, what this is showing, and it's best if you can try and home in on the legends. But you're seeing there the soil results from clear mines in the 80s, and you can see they're running and running and running, and these are consistent with some of the contacts we've got, and it's kind of a map that now it brings everything together. And you can actually see where the serpentinite comes out at the surface on the other lake of Dotted Lake. And we conducted a soil program, a very successful one, in the summer of 2021. And at the time, this had nothing to do with it. Now, we've reviewed the data that we got at that point, and since, and you can see that we're actually getting anomalies already where that's coming back to surface.
Mm-hmm.
So this whole band now comes very much into play with sound geological reasoning, and the cake mix really is bubbling up here.
Okay. Excellent. Well, I think it's very good that you've been able to take this historical data and as you say, digitize it and overlay it onto the maps and the license areas that Panther has. As I said before, it certainly looks like the geology is very similar in this whole area with other companies who are also operating. So it's nice to see that. You say that the focus is going to be on Abonga, but in the background you're going to be working on preparing some further exploration for the Dotted Lake area as well.
Oh, yes, 100%. Well, what happens in these scenarios is that when people start having success, and you actually, it releases information into the public domain that you can then access.
Mm-hmm.
So you start to understand a little bit more about what's going on and what's driving these. And that's what has happened in this case. And we've brought across to Dotted Lake just to have a review of it, and just to make sure that we're not missing anything, or that we're not missing the potential. And that's exactly what's happened in this instance.
Thank you very much, Darren Hazelwood, CEO of Panther Metals, for taking us through those slides today on the Dotted Lake area.
That's a pleasure. Thanks, Mark.
If you enjoyed this interview, then give us a thumbs up, a like or a retweet. Subscribe to us on YouTube or follow us on Twitter, and hit that notification bell to be the first to know when we release new content. There's loads of great content on our website too, across all our programs at stopboxmedia.com. Thank you for watching.